Hi, I'm Martyn and this is a Profit on Purpose interview with Ed Archer, or Elizabeth Archer, from SENDirect Consortium. Ed, thank you very much for joining me today. It's great to see you.
No problem.
Could you give us a little bit of background for people that haven't heard of SENDirect about what it is and I guess why it exists?
Well, SENDirect's come out of SEND Consortium, which is a group of national charities who are working together. And we first came together basically around the launch of the Children and Families Green Paper. So it's the Green Paper that led to the Children and Families Act, as it now is. And we came together because people were talking about testing the changes in that act. But actually we ended up doing something really different, because having those people in a room together allowed us to unpick the act a little bit. And there's some really exciting stuff in there about personal budgets that we knew families would be really into. We knew families wanted more choice and control, but we also knew that there wasn't a system out there to give it to them.
Am I right in thinking that you will be given a personal budget and then you have to go and sort your own services out, and that's where you guys fit in helping people navigate that landscape of choice?
So yeah, our project is basically around putting the control in the hands of families to choose the things that they choose based on around their children's interests rather than their children's diagnosis, which is how, sadly, and I think most local authorities and most providers have ambitions beyond this, but it's quite hard to cater for. Sadly, that is how most children's provision ends up being allocated on. You have this diagnosis and this is the service that meets your needs, rather than you're interested in animation or football or ballet, so that's what we're going to get you into.
Yeah, I was a parent in that position.
Yeah.
I can relate entirely. So you mentioned that it's a consortium. Mm-hmm. What does that mean? How does that work? Basically,
it's about 9 organisations putting aside their individual business interests and choosing to work together for the sake of their beneficiaries. And I think that's something we're used to doing around campaigning, but we're really not used to doing around business development. And it has been, overall, it's been incredibly positive, but I think every organisation around the table's learned quite a lot from the process that we've been through over the last few years.
Right. And what would you say, do you think those bigger learnings have been?
Certainly I started out quite naive and kind of skipping through fields of flowers about the whole thing, going, isn't it delightful that we're working together? This is going to be super easy. And it has been really easy, but actually the reality is everybody's in it for slightly different reasons. We're all in it for our beneficiaries, but we've got different priorities around what our beneficiaries need. And so coming up with a coherent business plan and a strategy for moving forward that meets all of our different organisations' aspirations for our beneficiaries within an incredibly short time frame with a small budget has involved compromises. It's also involved us being realistic about what we can do with the budget we have and about the limitations of the way that we were funded. Because we're funded by statutory funding, which has a time limit on it. You mentioned that you're statutory funded rather than commercially funded. Is that always going to be the case? I mean, what's the ambition in 3, 4, 5 years' time? I mean, we want it to change over time. We know that we can't keep going back to statutory funders, cap in hand, saying, can you give us money to develop this and to make it viable? A product that's about making families able to access services they want in the whole world, not just in the voluntary sector services, means that we have to be able to work alongside businesses, and we need to work in a way that they understand. And for them to place any value on what we're doing, we have to charge them, is the reality. So we're working really hard on being revenue neutral by the end of the year. This year we're a nice split, so there's some money that's come in from the consortia that's allowed us to do the things that statutory funding won't allow us to do, and then we've got a good chunk of statutory funding as well. So presumably in the past you've been putting in the work to develop this, mm-hmm. and not knowing whether you're going to secure the next round of funding. I mean, that must have been quite anxious. So where does the risk sit? Is it shared across the consortium? Is it with you? Where is the risk in that? It's quite an interesting kind of breakdown, because the consortia speaks publicly as kind of one voice, as the same consortia. So the risk in terms of reputational risk is fairly evenly shared, because they've all tweeted about this, everyone's CEOs have written about it, we've all kind of got our voices behind it. But the hardline commercial risk falls entirely with Contact to Family, because Contact to Family get the funding, Contact to Family have the contract with the department. I remember when we first spoke, which was about 18 months ago, and at the time there was an awful lot of nervousness, as I recall, and it did look as though whether the project might actually be cancelled because of the risks around funding. What were the implications of that anxiety? There was a danger that the idea of the risks was larger than the risk itself and was slowing down our delivery. So one of the things we worked on together was really kind of nailing down those risks and kind of talking about them really openly and saying, yes, this thing could happen that you're imagining, but this is the stuff we're doing to stop it from happening. And if it does, actually, we've got a plan, and this is how we're minimising the impact on everybody. And putting those trapdoors in made it much, much easier to get that sign up.
I think that's absolutely key, and the way that you just described it there as trapdoors, the way routes of escape is exactly right. That if you can say, if we're not here at this point, then we'll pull the plug, and the worst exposure is 10 grand or whatever it is. That created quite a shift in terms of people's mindset. Didn't it?
It meant that we could move a lot quicker, and I think that was the thing that I knew that we needed. Was I needed to have that freedom to be able to push forward, and I got that through their confidence that actually we did understand the risks, we had thought about the risks, and that actually they were manageable.
So I know from our conversations that this has been a bit of a groundbreaking project, not just for the organisation and the people within it, but potentially for the sector. So what would you say are the biggest learnings for you from the project itself?
I think it's probably 4 things, and I think the first thing for me is about really understanding systems. So we've got a lot of different stakeholders that we had to work with for this project, because when you're helping families use their personal budgets, you need to be able to do more than just work with parents. You need to also understand the people that they're buying services from, and you need to understand the people who are commissioning those services, and you need to understand all of the different IT systems that everybody's using and their own financial constraints. So there's something about really, really starting with what it is that all of those stakeholders need and where those needs overlap. And then knowing what's in it for each of your stakeholders in trusting you and engaging in you. I think that's the second thing, is kind of really understanding why they care that you exist. Then I think the third thing for me is about failing fast. And that's a term we use all the time in digital development. You get sick of hearing it. But you don't really hear it in the voluntary sector. And I think it's important right the way across delivery of something ambitious, not just across the digital part. And then for me, I think it's about communication. You've got so many stakeholders and they all want different things, and it's about being able to communicate as clearly and succinctly as possible.
It was one of the things that we worked on quite a lot, wasn't it?
Yes, spent a lot of time on that. I think I sent you quite a lot of 30-page papers that you sent back to me saying, I'm not even going to read them, send it back at 5. And that was really hard for me, but it also means you're able to boil down to what's really important.
You're telling people what they need to know rather than everything that you know.
Everything that I know, yeah, exactly.
How do you see the opportunity for this kind of system in the future?
Well, disabled people put £212 billion into the economy every year, and yet almost universally they tell us that they are discriminated against using any type of commercial or public service because they don't quite meet their needs. For me, there's something really exciting about bringing all of that purchasing power and all of those opinions and all of that voice together using one site, one interface. We talk about it as a 3-part offer, as like Amazon for families. So it's got that TripAdvisor element, it's what's out there, how much does it cost, what do other people think of it, with the additional complexity that allows families to build profiles of who they are and share those details with professionals so they can ask for the reasonable adjustments that they've got a right to ask for. And then the second part is about the information people need to make intelligent choices, and that's not all created by us because that wouldn't make sense. It's created by partners who are experts right throughout the sector and beyond. And then the third part is that bit about market development. It's about understanding what it is people are looking for and why they can't find it, and filling those gaps basically. And the more people that use the site, the more powerful that becomes, and actually the more inclusive society becomes, because there's a huge number of businesses out there that are not going to respond to people asking them for reasonable adjustments because it's the right thing to do, because their stakeholders don't care. Yeah. That's why scale-up's so important. That's why we wouldn't want this to be something that was run in one local authority or even in one nation of this country long term. We want this to be a huge movement of families who aren't engaging on a please help me way, but are actually saying we are powerful consumers who have rights. That's what I'm excited about.
So in terms of your learnings from delivering such a big social enterprise project, what would you say to other people who are starting out on that journey that you've been on?
Don't try and do it alone. I genuinely think partnership working is the way forward. I know it takes time. I know it can be frustrating, but I also think it offers far more benefits than difficulties in the long term. Be prepared to change. Yes, it's great to start with a vision, but actually don't make any assumptions about how that change is going to look when it's put in front of them, because you have to be prepared to learn. If you cling too tightly to, and this is how we're going to do it, you'll lose the outcome, and the outcome's the thing that you can't afford to lose.
Now, you wrote to me at the very end of our engagement when we've been working together for a few months on this, and you described that the whole process, the project itself as well, had been quite transformational in the way that you saw things. How would you describe that?
I found you deeply irritating at times, in a really good way, because I'd be saying, these people, this element of the sector need us. And he was like, you were like, good, then they can pay for you. And I'd be like, but they need us. And you'd be like, exactly. And I think there was just something about valuing the work that we do at its right level that I'd struggled with. I think it's really important, and the thing that I've taken from this most, it's really important that you know who your beneficiaries are, because they're the people you're loyal to. Yeah. They're the people that you're like, okay, every single decision I make, I need to ask myself how it impacts on our beneficiaries.
I think that the bit that you said on valuing what you do and putting a commercial value on it is very, very important, because I see that in a lot of charitable organisations where you do fantastic stuff. The value that you provide, not just to your beneficiaries, but to the other parties involved, is enormous. And I do see lots and lots of examples where organisations don't appreciate that value. They just don't realise how much it's worth to other organisations. And if you want to, if you choose to, if it's right for you, you can charge for that. And it would be really good for you potentially if you did sometimes.
And it's that value, isn't it? It's the ongoing value of, if I can charge for this and I can bring in revenue, what impact will that then have on my beneficiaries? And I think it's being able to free yourself up to think that way. Cool.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It was wonderful to see you again.
Cool, lovely to see you.